Table of Contents, British Columbia.
All about British Columbia, including Vancouver and Victoria, with visiting and touring information, geography, history, attractions, and other points of interest.
Dr. Sydney Soclof. Dr. Sydney22@gmail.com. 2022. Narration by Dr. Sydney Soclof,
Zoe Phonemes,
and Nathan Coltove. For a more complete discussion of YouTube navigation, please go to this video using the link here.
Chapter 1. Introduction to British Columbia.
This is the British Columbia provincial flag. Where is British Columbia?
British Columbia is the westernmost province of Canada.
Here is Canada. British Columbia is just north of the U.S. state of Washington.
The Panhandle of Alaska forms about half of British Columbia's western boundary.
British Columbia is also bounded on the west by the Pacific Ocean.
British Columbia is bounded on the north by the Yukon Territory and Northwest Territories of Canada.
British Columbia is bounded on the east by the province of Alberta. British Columbia is bounded on the south by the state of Washington.
British Columbia stretches 740 miles, 1180 kilometers, from north to south and 640 miles, 1020 kilometers, from east to west at its widest point. How big is British Columbia? British Columbia is 7.5 times the area of Japan. British Columbia is greater in area than France plus Germany. British Columbia is 7.5 times the area of New York State. British Columbia is greater in size than the combination of California, Oregon and the state of Washington. British Columbia is 4 times the area of the United Kingdom and British Columbia is larger than Texas. The provincial capital is Victoria, located in the southwest on the southern tip of Vancouver Island.
British Columbia ranks third among the Canadian provinces in size, after Quebec and Ontario.
From Vancouver Island, the Trans-Canada Highway, which is 4,860 miles, 7,821 kilometers, long, is extended by ferry across the Strait of Georgia to the mainland city of Vancouver, at the foot of British Columbia's Coast Mountains.
The province's vast territory lies almost entirely within the Great Mountain System, or Cordillera, that stretches along the western edge of the Americas.
These mountains create a series of valleys and a broad central interior plateau where settlement has concentrated, especially in the southwestern corner near Vancouver. The Coast Mountains border the entire west coast of British Columbia.
Hundreds of coastal islands, the largest of which are Queen Charlotte Island and Vancouver Island, offer protection to ships along the coastline.
Vancouver Island is the largest island on either the east or west coasts of North America.
The broad Fraser River Delta, behind Vancouver to the south, is the largest of the coastal lowlands.
It is important to note that the city of Vancouver is on the mainland of British Columbia and not on Vancouver Island. More than half of the province's land is forested, while another third is a barren tundra snowfields and glaciers. Over 3/4 of the area is above 3,000 feet, 900 meters. The population of British Columbia is concentrated near the international border with the U.S. About 3/4 of its people live in the southwestern corner of the province. Vancouver is the largest city in the province and the third largest in Canada. It is the nation's leading Pacific seaport and a manufacturing center. Victoria, the provincial capital, is the second city in size. New Westminster and North Vancouver are seaports and manufacturing suburbs of Vancouver. Prince George, Kamloops and Kelowna are major cities in the interior of British Columbia.
Prince Rupert is a major base for the British Columbia fishing fleet. Vancouver is Canada's third largest city and leading Pacific port. Victoria is the capital city of the province of British Columbia.
The major cities of the interior of British Columbia are Prince George, Kamloops and Kelowna. The Peace River Valley is a farming region with growing mineral developments.
The Canadian Rockies sit on the eastern border of British Columbia with Banff and Jasper National Parks. There are also many hot springs resorts, such as Radium Hot Springs.
Yoho Glacier and Kootenay National Parks are also in the Canadian Rockies of British Columbia. Jasper and Banff National Parks are in the Canadian Rockies, bordering British Columbia and Alberta.
Athabasca Glacier is a large glacier in Banff National Park. Chapter 2. The population of British Columbia.
Here is the population of the provinces of Canada, going east to west. The total population of Canada is 38 million. British Columbia is the third most populous province, with a population of 5.21 million. Only the provinces of Ontario at 14.8 million and Quebec at 8.6 million have more people. Toronto in Ontario is the largest city in Canada, with a metropolitan area population of 6.2 million.
Montreal in Quebec is in second place, with a metropolitan area population of 4.3 million. Vancouver, British Columbia, on the west coast, is the third largest city with a metropolitan area population of 2.6 million. Victoria is the 13th largest city in Canada, with a metropolitan area population of 400,000. About 3/4 of the population of British Columbia is urban.
About 60% of the people are of British descent. Their origins include German, Scandinavian, French, Dutch, Italian, and Polish.
There are about 55,000 Indians and an increasingly large Asian population, especially in Vancouver.
Chapter 3. The history of British Columbia.
At the initial contact with European explorers, Indians in the area numbered about 80,000. The coast was dominated by such peoples as the Coast Salish, Nootka, Kwakiutl, Bellakula, Tsimshian and Hattah.
Europeans first saw the area in the late 18th century. Spanish ships came first in 1774, followed by the British explorer Captain James Cook, who was searching for the Northwest Passage.
British and American fur traders were the first to explore the area and claim Vancouver Island. The island was finally recognized as solely British territory, and in 1849 it was made a crown colony by the imperial government.
The once thriving fur trade brought the earliest white settlers to British Columbia. British Columbia was invited to join the rest of Canada. British Columbia would agree to enter only if it was promised that a transcontinental railroad would be built to connect British Columbia with the rest of Canada.
That was agreed to, and the Dominion of Canada was extended from the Atlantic to the Pacific when British Columbia became the 6th province in 1871. The railroad was completed in 1887, and Vancouver became the western terminus of the Canadian Pacific Railway. The result was a major increase in the population of British Columbia, especially in the Vancouver area.
Establishing a steamship line connecting Vancouver with Asia in 1891 assured the city's future as a port.
The second growth spurt began after World War II and is still underway. The transfer of sovereignty of Hong Kong from Britain to China resulted in the significant immigration of Chinese to the Vancouver area. Rapid industrial development and a moderate coastal climate have helped double the population in recent decades. British Columbia's hydroelectric power capacity was greatly increased with the signing of the Columbia River Treaty between the United States and Canada in 1964.
1955 The first commercial oil well in British Columbia went into production. The late 1970s and early 1980s were times of strong economic and population growth in British Columbia.
British Columbia's subsequent growth was based primarily on lumbering and mining. British Columbia becomes Canada's third most populous province by the late 20th century.
Chapter 4. The people of British Columbia.
British Columbia, in the late 20th century, was also the most urbanized province of Canada and one of the most racially diverse, with an increasingly sizable Asian population.
People of British descent formed the controlling elite. The arrival of large numbers of Europeans, mainly Dutch, Germans and Italians, occurred after World War II in 1945.
More recent arrivals include ethnic Chinese from Hong Kong, Vietnamese and Sikhs from India. These are the top 10 languages spoken in British Columbia.
British Columbia has a modern and prosperous economy based on logging for the production of lumber and plywood, extraction of coal, copper, and oil and natural gas, hydroelectric production along various rivers and raising grain, fruits, and cattle in warmer lowland areas.
Chapter 5. Resources and Economy of British Columbia. Vancouver is the largest port in Canada, providing shipping facilities for the Prairie Provinces and the Yukon.
Large areas of British Columbia are rich in minerals, including copper, coal, gold, lead, molybdenum, silver and zinc. Refineries near Vancouver process crude oil from Alberta in British Columbia. Raw materials for the province's wood product factories and its paper and pulp mills come chiefly from the coniferous forests on the western slopes of the Coast Mountains and in the interior.
The coastal region's constant moisture, long growing season and mild temperatures produce particularly dense forests. The species of greatest commercial importance is the Douglas fir. Other kinds include spruce, hemlock, cedar, and pine.
The value of the fish caught in British Columbia's waters is greater than that of any other province. Salmon is the most valuable fish taken by Canadian fishermen, and almost all comes from British Columbia.
Between early spring and late fall, the salmon return from the ocean to spawning grounds up the rivers. The Fraser River has the most extensive runs.
Halibut are caught chiefly around the Queen Charlotte Islands. Herring abound in the Inside Passage and around Vancouver Island. Other fishes and shellfishes caught in commercial quantities include black cod, lingcod, flounder, sole clams, oysters, and crabs. Mining is one of the oldest and largest industries in the province. The Fraser River and Caribou Mountain areas were famous for their deposits.
Minerals are widely distributed throughout the province. Copper comes from Howe Sound, north of Vancouver, Princeton, and Stewart. Asbestos is the leading non-metallic mineral in the area.
Pipelines carry oil from the Peace River fields and Alberta across British Columbia to refineries near Vancouver and northwestern Washington. A natural gas pipeline was completed from the Peace River fields to Vancouver in 1957. Coal is mined on Vancouver Island and in the Kootenay River region. In the late 18th century, British and Americans traded with the Indians for highly prized sea otter pelts. Fur farms now produce most commercial pelts. The trapping of fur-bearing animals, once so important in the territory, is now a minor industry. Cheap and abundant hydroelectric power greatly aids the province's manufacturing activity. British Columbia ranks third among the provinces in manufacturing. First in value is the forest products industry.
A huge aluminum smelter began operations in 1954 at Kitimat. Most of the land under cultivation is in the warm southern valleys. Irrigation is necessary on the majority of farms.
The mild climate of the Okanagan Valley is excellent for raising tree fruits, and British Columbia is a leading apple-growing province.
Of the tree fruits raised are pears, peaches, plums, and cherries.
Strawberries, raspberries, and loganberries are grown on the lower Fraser River. Mixed farming is common on Vancouver Island and in the Fraser and Peace River valleys. Beef cattle are raised chiefly on the interior plateaus of the Chilcotin, Kamloops, and Caribou regions.
Dairy cattle are kept in the Fraser River Valley, mainly to supply the Vancouver metropolitan area. Hogs and poultry are raised throughout the province.
Nearly 41,000 miles, 66,000 kilometers, of roads and highways crisscross British Columbia. The Alaska Highway crosses the isolated northern interior of the province.
The Canadian Pacific, the Canadian National, and the British Columbia Railways serve the province. All major towns and cities in British Columbia have regularly scheduled airline flights, and short flights make the remote areas accessible.
On the coast, government-owned ferries handle the vehicle traffic between the mainland and Vancouver Island across the Strait of Georgia.
British Columbia's well-developed transportation network provides tourists easy access to the province's spectacular scenery and excellent hunting and fishing areas.
The University of British Columbia is a public university in Vancouver that opened in 1915 and is the province's top center for higher education.
The two other public universities are the University of Victoria and Simon Fraser University at Burnaby near Vancouver. Chapter 6. Vancouver Island.
Vancouver Island is in southwestern British Columbia, Canada. It is the largest island on the Pacific coast of North America. Vancouver Island is separated from mainland Canada by the Strait of Georgia and from the United States by the Juan de Fuca Strait.
The distance from Seattle to Victoria is 74 miles, 119 kilometers.
The distance from Seattle to Vancouver is 119 miles, 192 kilometers. The distance from Vancouver to Victoria is 57 miles, 92 kilometers. These are the San Juan Islands extending from Puget Sound to the Strait of Georgia.
Chapter 7. The History of Vancouver Island.
Captain James Cook was the first to discover Vancouver Island in 1778.
The island was surveyed in 1792 by Captain George Vancouver, and held by the Hudson's Bay Company, until it was made a British Crown colony in 1849.
In 1866, Vancouver Island was united with the mainland colony of British Columbia. In 1871, the colony of British Columbia entered the Dominion of Canada as a province. And Victoria, the island's largest city, became the provincial capital.
Vancouver Island's primary industries include lumbering, fishing, mining, coal, iron ore and copper, agriculture, dairy products, fruits and vegetables, and tourism.
The major population centers are situated predominantly along the southeast coast of Vancouver Island, and apart from Victoria, are Nanaimo, North Cowichan and Duncan.
Further north are the towns of Port Hardy, Campbell-Riva and Courtenay.
The population of Vancouver Island is about 600,000, concentrated mainly in the south near Victoria.
Chapter 8. Victoria.
Victoria is on the southern tip of Vancouver Island. It is notable that the Canadian-American border has been stretched below the 49th parallel to keep all of Vancouver Island in Canada.
This shows the location of Victoria, the capital and second largest city of British Columbia.
Victoria is on the southern tip of Vancouver Island and is surrounded by water on three sides.
The population of Victoria is 71,000, and the metropolitan area population is 300,000.
Victoria's metropolitan area includes the communities of Esquimalt, Oak Bay and Saanich.
Here is a view of beautiful Victoria with the inner harbor in the foreground. Victoria receives over 2 million visitors a year.
Victoria's inner harbor is the center of the tourist area.
This is the Victoria Inner Harbor.
Victoria offers a unique blend of old-world British charm and 21st-century comfort.
Victoria is called the Gem of the Pacific Northwest and the Garden City of Canada.
Victoria is the destination of millions of international visitors each year.
The city of Victoria is named after Queen Victoria, who came to the throne of the UK in 1837.
Victoria is one of British Columbia's oldest communities. Victoria was founded in 1843 as a Hudson's Bay Company fur trading post known as Fort Camerson, and later renamed Fort Victoria. Victoria was associated with the gold rush of the 1860s. It is now one of the largest commercial and distribution centers in British Columbia. Because of its good climate, it is a popular tourist resort and retirement community. Victoria is a major Pacific Coast port with a naval base and dockyard. It is connected to mainland Canada and the United States by air and ferry service, and the remainder of the island by rail and highway.
Manufacturing is centered on the forest products industry and includes shipbuilding and food processing. Here is the Victoria area. Note the proximity to the state of Washington.
This shows the Victoria area in the Inner Harbor.
Cruise ships berth at Ogden Point.
Ogden Point is only a short taxi ride or a 15-minute walk from downtown. Most cruise ships offer shuttles or taxi services.
Here is Ogden Point, and the city center of Victoria is just a short distance away. Here is a satellite view of Ogden Point and the city center of Victoria.
Here is a cruise ship docked at Ogden Point.
Chapter 9. Victoria Points of Interest. Most of the points of interest in Victoria are very close to the downtown city centre area.
Chapter 10. The Royal British Columbia Museum is a natural history and human history museum in Victoria, founded in 1886.
The Royal British Columbia Provincial Museum is well worth a visit.
This is the Royal British Columbia Provincial Museum.
This shows the location of the Royal British Columbia Provincial Museum and the Fairmont Empress Hotel.
This is the Royal British Columbia Provincial Museum.
This again is the Royal British Columbia Provincial Museum. These are totem poles at the Victoria Conference Centre.
This is the Victoria Provincial Legislature. The Victorian-style Parliament buildings, the seat of the Provincial Legislative Assembly, overlooks the Inner Harbour and Yacht Basin. Here is the location of the Parliament buildings. This shows the location of the British Columbia Parliament buildings, the Royal British Columbia Provincial Museum and the Fairmont Empress Hotel. These are the British Columbia Parliament buildings. Chapter 11. The Fairmont Empress Hotel.
The Fairmont Empress, most commonly known as the Empress, is the oldest and most famous hotel in Victoria. On Government Street facing the Inner Harbour, the Empress has become an iconic symbol for the city itself.
The Fairmont Empress Hotel has 477 rooms, with most either overlooking the Inner Harbour or the hotel's rear courtyard gardens. It has 4 restaurants. Francis Rattenbury designed this Edwardian chateau-style hotel for the Canadian Pacific Railroad as a terminus hotel for its steamship line, whose main terminal was just a block away.
Victoria emerged as a tourist destination beginning in the mid to late 1920s. The hotel was to serve business people and visitors to Victoria. Still, later as Canadian Pacific ceased its passenger services to the city, the hotel was successfully remarketed as a resort to tourists. The hotel was built between 1904 and 1908, opening for service that year. Additional wings were added between 1909 and 1914 and in 1928. During this time, the Empress, as it was known then, played hostess to kings, queens, movie stars, and many famous people.
Here again is the location of the buildings near the inner harbor.
Victoria retains an old-world charm that distinguishes itself from other cities. Victoria's economy is based on tourism, public service, federal institutions, forestry, and the resource industries. More than 17% of Victorians are public servants. Thousands of federal workers are employed at Canadian Forces Base near Esquimalt and the national institutions.
Here is a view of the Victoria area, showing the Butchart Gardens and the ferry terminals at Sydney and Swartz Bay.
The quaint shops on Government Street. An open-air craft market in Bastion Square. Antique Row. Murchie's the Tea Merchant. And many art galleries and excellent specialty stores downtown. Bastion Square is very close to the inner harbor.
This is Bastion Square.
Victoria has a small Chinatown. Victoria has more hours of sunshine than anywhere else in Canada.
Victoria's architecture has attracted filmmakers worldwide and has been portrayed as Paris, England, Boston, and even New York City in the 18th century.
Craigdarroch Castle is a historic Victorian-era mansion, built in the 1890s by coal baron Robert Dunsmuir. He was the wealthiest man in 19th-century British Columbia.
Chapter 12. The Butchart Gardens are a few miles north of Victoria on Vancouver Island.
Butchart Gardens have 55 acres of excellent floral displays open to the public.
There are spectacular views from many paths that meander through 4 central gardens. This is a view of Butchart Gardens.
The Butchart Gardens had their start in 1904 when Jenny Butchart began to beautify a quarry site.
As Mr. Butchart exhausted the limestone in the quarry near their house, his enterprising wife, Jenny, conceived an unprecedented plan for refurbishing the bleak pit that resulted. She requisitioned tons of topsoil from farmland nearby, brought it to Tut Inlet by horse and cart, and used it to line the floor of the abandoned quarry. Little by little, under Jenny Butchart's supervision, the abandoned quarry bloomed as the spectacular sunken garden. The Butchart Gardens receive more than 1 million visitors each year. Butchart Gardens are about 14 miles, 21 kilometers, north of Victoria.
This is a view of Butchart Gardens. This is a view of the fountain at Butchart Gardens.
This is a view of Butchart Gardens. This is another view of Butchart Gardens.
Chapter 13. Many of the sights of Victoria can be seen on open-air hop-on, hop-off buses. The 90-minute sightseeing tour with onboard commentary gives you a quick way to see the main attractions of this beautiful city.
All big bus tickets are valid for 2 days. The entire loop takes 90 minutes. However, you can hop on and off at any of the 22 stops, allowing you to see the sights at your own pace. A bus will come by every 20 minutes in peak season.
Chapter 14. Vancouver. Vancouver is on the southwest corner of British Columbia. It is just a few miles north of the U.S. border and 140 miles, 225 kilometers, north of Seattle.
Vancouver is across the Strait of Georgia from Vancouver Island.
Vancouver lies between Butchart Inlet, an arm of the Strait of Georgia, to the north and the Fraser River Delta to the south.
Vancouver has a fine natural harbor on a superb site facing the sea and mountains.
This is the central Vancouver area.
Vancouver is the industrial, commercial, and financial center of British Columbia.
Chapter 15. History of Vancouver. The first permanent European settlement began in 1866 when a saloon was built near a small sawmill. In the 1870s, the settlement developed as a community called Granville. In 1886, Granville became the terminus of the first Trans-Canada Railroad, the Canadian Pacific. Granville was incorporated as a city with a population of 2,500. Granville was renamed Vancouver to honor Captain George Vancouver of the British Royal Navy because he navigated the coast in 1792.
The Panama Canal facilitated fish, grain and lumber exports from Vancouver to Europe and the eastern coasts of the United States and Canada. Fish and wood processing industries provided job opportunities for immigrant workers.
In the 1930s, Vancouver became Canada's third most populous city and its major Pacific Coast port. During World War II, the city was a center for war industries, particularly shipbuilding and repairing. Today, Vancouver serves as Canada's central business hub for trade with Asia and the Pacific Rim.
Vancouver is the focus of one of the country's most populous metropolitan regions. It is a major cultural center with museums, art galleries, and a theater complex.
Metropolitan Vancouver, with a population of 550,000, contains almost half of British Columbia's population. The population of the Vancouver metropolitan area is 2 million.
Vancouver spreads east opposite Vancouver Island in the southwestern corner of the British Columbia mainland and occupies a site facing the sea and the mountains. Extensive forests and surrounding areas provide raw materials for numerous sawmills, plywood factories, and paper manufacturing plants. Most of Vancouver's historic buildings are in the Gastown and Chinatown areas near downtown.
Older sections of the city have undergone considerable change since 1960 when downtown high-rise office buildings and hotels were built. Falls Creek, a decaying industrial area with sawmills, rail yards and small shops, was transformed into a residential development project. Gastown was the original heart of the city and was restored in the 1880s style with antique stores and boutiques.
This is the Gastown steam clock.
Here is the cruise ship terminal in Gastown, just a short distance away. Gastown was named for John Gassy Jack Dayton, who built the first saloon in town.
He was called Gassy Jack because of the tall tales he was fond of telling. This shows the location of Gastown. Chapter 16. Vancouver Points of Interest. Vancouver is noted for its recreational facilities and has more than 130 parks. Stanley Park occupies more than 1,000 acres, 400 hectares, of the downtown area near the harbor entrance, which the Lions Gate Bridge crosses.
This is a view of Stanley Park and Lions Gate Bridge.
This is a cruise ship passing Stanley Park.
Stanley Park includes an arboretum, gardens, lagoons, lakes, and aquarium, a theater, a zoo, and 50 miles, 80 kilometers, of trails, and is famous for its forests of centuries-old Douglas firs and red cedars.
These are totem poles in Stanley Park.
Exhibition Park holds the annual Pacific National Exhibition. Other parks include Mount Seymour Provincial Park, Queen Elizabeth Park, and Lynn Park. Nearby Grouse Mountain, 3,974 feet, 1,211 meters, high, provides excellent ski slopes in the winter. The mountaintop can be reached by an aerial tramway.
Vancouver is British, mainly in character with some Chinese influence. Almost 3/4 of the population is of British ancestry. The Chinese, French, Japanese, and East Indians are the largest other ethnic groups. Vancouver became more cosmopolitan after World War II, when waves of immigrants, especially Chinese and other Asians, came for better job opportunities. Here is the location of Chinatown.
The Vancouver Chinatown is the second largest in North America after San Francisco.
An excellent place to get an overall view of Vancouver is the Vancouver Lookout at Harbour Centre at 555 West Hastings Street, just a couple of blocks from the cruise ship terminal. This shows the location of the Harbour Centre building at 555 West Hastings Street. This is the British Columbia Place Stadium with an inflatable roof.
This shows the location of the British Columbia Place Stadium. This is False Creek, the site of Expo 86 World's Fair. This is the Burrard Inlet in Stanley Park.
This is the Canadian Pacific Rail Yards and Container Ship Terminal.
This is Water Street, the heart of Gastown.
This is downtown Vancouver.
Large residential suburbs extend to the south and east along the Fraser River, including the satellite towns of New Westminster, Port Moody, and Port Coquitlam. Vancouver's northern and western suburbs extend up to 5,000 feet, 1,500 meters, on the steep mountain slopes. Noted educational institutions are the University of British Columbia, 1908, Simon Fraser University, 1963, and several regional colleges. Major cultural institutions are the Macmillan Planetarium, Centennial Park Maritime Museum, Opera House, Queen Elizabeth Theatre, Vancouver Art Gallery, and the Vancouver Aquarium. Chapter 17. The Storyeum is a relatively new attraction in Vancouver and is highly recommended.
The Storyeum is located only a few blocks from the cruise ship terminal in Gastown on Water Street near the steam clock. The Storyeum tells the story of Vancouver and British Columbia uniquely, taking you through time in a series of live performances.
This is Vancouver Maritime Museum. This shows the location of the Vancouver Maritime Museum. This shows the location of the Vancouver Maritime Museum. Robson Square has provincial government offices, a skating rink, multi-level shopping and food facilities, and the British Columbia Place Sports Stadium with a seating capacity of 60,000.
Robson Street is a major shopping street and centre of activity in Vancouver, with many restaurants and boutiques.
Chapter 18. The Port of Vancouver.
Sometimes called Canada's gateway to the Pacific, shipping services link Vancouver with the Pacific ports of the United States, China, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. Products of Western Canada's farms, ranches, forests, mines and industries are sent by rail to Vancouver, and then by water to the world's ports. Vancouver's natural, ice-free harbor is one of the world's largest.
With extensive docks and grain elevator facilities, Vancouver is one of the busiest ports in Canada, ranking first in tonnage handled.
This is a postage stamp showing Vancouver Harbor.
Vancouver's significant industries are wood, fish, food processing, fruit and vegetable canning, sugar refining, shipbuilding, and repairing, metal fabricating, printing and publishing. Other industries produce beverages, tobacco, leather goods, machinery, transport equipment, furniture, petroleum and coal products, and electrical, rubber, chemical and plastic products. Low-cost electricity and natural gas for its industries are provided by nearby plants and pipelines from Alberta.
Exports include wheat, grains, lumber, fishing fish products, metals, manufactured items, and minerals. Regular ferry service connects the city with Vancouver Island. This is a British Columbia ferry.
Vancouver is the industrial, commercial, and financial heart of British Columbia, with trade and transportation as essential components of its economy.
Vancouver has extensive docks and grain elevator facilities.
The Port of Vancouver handles freighters, a fishing fleet, and ferries to Vancouver Island, and is connected to mainland Canada and the United States by 4 rail lines. Significant cargoes include grain, coal, sulfur, potash, and forest products.
Vancouver is an important cruise ship port.
This is the Vancouver cruise ship port.
Forestry, tourism, and mining are important economic activities. Related factors are manufacturing and shipping, processing of forest and agricultural products, and fish also are significant, as is oil refining. Major manufacturing activities are producing metals, chemicals, boats, trucks, and machinery for sawmilling, mining, and pulp and paper processing.
Power for sawmilling, plywood, and paper manufacturing is provided by hydroelectric developments to the north and by oil and natural gas pipelines from Alberta.
Vancouver is gaining high-technology industries and has become a major movie production center. Vancouver's atmosphere is somewhat British with East Asian overtones. Its Chinatown is overshadowed on the Pacific coast only by San Francisco's Gastown is a restoration, the 1880s, of the original heart of the city. The business and financial district adjoins the port facilities along the Butchart Inlet. Large attractively landscaped residential suburbs in the metropolitan area extend to the south and east along the mouth of the Fraser River.
They encompass the cities of Richmond, Burnaby, Delta, New Westminster and Surrey.
To the north, across the Butchart Inlet, are the residential suburbs of North Vancouver and West Vancouver, backed by steep mountains up to 10,000 feet, 3,000 meters.
These northern suburbs of North Vancouver and West Vancouver are connected to Vancouver by the Lions Gate Bridge and Ironworkers Memorial Bridge.
This is the Lions Gate Bridge.
This shows Vancouver and vicinity.
Chapter 19. Expo 86 World's Fair. In 1986, Vancouver celebrated its centennial with the World's Fair known as Expo 86.
Canada Place, with its white sail-like roof, was built for the fair.
Canada Place juts out into the Butchart Inlet. Canada Place has a convention center, cruise port, restaurants, shops, and a hotel.
This is a geodesic sphere from the Expo 86 World's Fair. This is Science World at the Expo 86 World's Fair. This is the Yale Town District of Vancouver.
Yaletown was formerly the yards of the Canadian Pacific Railroad that has been redeveloped into one of the densely populated areas of Vancouver.
This is Yaletown. These are some of the educational and cultural institutions in Vancouver. The University of British Columbia, 1908, with a notable Museum of Anthropology. Simon Fraser University, 1963. The H.R. Macmillan Planetarium. Vancouver and Maritime Museums. The Vancouver Art Gallery, 1931, and the British Columbia Place Stadium, 1983, for sporting events, concerts and conventions. Vancouver has a symphony orchestra, opera and ballet companies, and a lively theater community.
Chapter 20. The Money of Canada.
Currency exchange rates can change daily. For the latest exchange rate, click on this icon. $1 equals 1.29 Canadian dollars, and $1 Canadian equals 0.77 US dollars. Chapter 21. The climate of British Columbia.
British Columbia has a variety of climates. Along the coast, the winds blowing off the Pacific bring moderate temperatures in both winter and summer.
Here are temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Vancouver, British Columbia. Winter average temperatures are in the mid to high 30s, and summer temperatures are in the mid 50s to low 60s. Here are temperatures in degrees Celsius throughout the year in Vancouver, together with the yearly average temperature. Summer temperatures average around 17 degrees Celsius, dropping to 2 or 3 degrees in the winter.
Here are temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Victoria, together with the yearly average temperature. Winter average temperatures are in the high 30s, and summer temperatures are in the mid-50s to low 60s.
Hail temperatures in degrees Celsius throughout the year in Victoria, together with the yearly average temperature. Winter average temperatures are around 3 degrees Celsius, and summer temperatures are in the comfortable 14 to 16 degrees Celsius range. Here is a comparison between Victoria and Vancouver. We see the temperatures are very similar, except that Vancouver is a couple of degrees warmer in the summer and a couple of degrees colder in the winter.
Here are temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Winnipeg, Manitoba, together with the yearly average temperature. Winter average temperatures are in the high 30s, and summer temperatures are in the mid-50s to low 60s.
Vancouver, at 49.2 superscript ON, is at about the same latitude as Winnipeg. However, the influence of the Pacific Ocean has a powerful moderating effect on the climate of coastal British Columbia.
Here are temperatures in degrees Celsius throughout the year in Winnipeg, together with the yearly average temperature. Winter average temperatures are in the frigid -15 to -20 degrees Celsius range. In summer temperatures get up to the 16 degrees Celsius range.
Here are temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, together with the yearly average temperature. Winter average temperatures are between 0 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit, but the summer average temperatures get up to the low 60s.
Here are temperatures in degrees Celsius throughout the year in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, together with the yearly average temperature.
Hail temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Toronto, together with the yearly average temperature. Winter average temperatures are in the low 20s, but the summer average temperatures get up to the mid-60s.
Here are temperatures in degrees Celsius throughout the year in Toronto, together with the yearly average temperature. Here is a comparison between Toronto and Vancouver. Here are temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and the yearly average temperature. Winter average temperatures are in the low 20s, but the summer average temperatures get up to the mid-60s.
Hail temperatures in degrees Celsius throughout the year in Halifax, together with the yearly average temperature.
Here is a comparison between Halifax on the east coast of Canada with Vancouver on the west coast. Note the moderating effect of the prevailing westerly onshore winds from the Pacific Ocean, especially on the winter temperatures.
On reaching the coast mountains, the winds cool and lose their moisture. Rainfall on the western slopes is heavy, and fogs are frequent.
East of the coast mountains, a series of wet and dry belts result from the interference of mountain ranges. Some parts of the region east of the mountains are nearly deserts, with an annual rainfall of fewer than 10 inches, 250 millimeters. The valleys of the Columbia-Kootenay region have a dry climate, with an annual rainfall of 18 to 20 inches, 450 to 500 millimeters. Temperatures in the far northern section of the interior of British Columbia may range from below -70 degrees Fahrenheit, -57 degrees Celsius, in the winter to above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Celsius, in the summer. Winter temperatures are less severe in the southern section and the Peace River country. Along the coast, at Victoria, temperatures are also milder, averaging about 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 16 degrees Celsius, in July and 39 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius, in January. Recommended videos, British Columbia.
Recommended video, Top 10 Reasons to Visit Vancouver. Recommended video, Top 10 Best Places to Visit in Vancouver.
Recommended video, Top 10 Best Tourist Places to Visit in Victoria, British Columbia.
Recommended video, Victoria, Canada, Top 10 Things to Do. Recommended video, British Columbia's regions.
The Maple Leaf Forever.
Table of Contents, British Columbia.
Thanks for watching.